If the idea of building better business acumen feels a bit daunting, I promise you're not alone. This is something that so many HR and people professionals worry about because I think that the term business acumen sounds a bit formal and corporate-y, and we're not necessarily taught what it really means or how to actually go about building it. But we do all know that it's important. If you've looked at any job description for almost any level of HR role recently, you'll have seen that business acumen is often on there as a requirement for the role. And in the UK, we know that the CIPD thinks it's really important as well because it has it as one of the components of its profession map. So this episode of HR Coffee Time is here to help. We're going to strip away any of that feeling of formality or nervousness about it, and I'm going to share 3 really simple tips with you on how you can get started on building better business acumen so you feel really well equipped to do brilliantly in your role, or you feel really confident about applying for a new role and know that you're massively increasing your chances of getting your next role or making an impact. And to help me share these 3 different ideas with you, we're going to be hearing from 3 of the brilliant Chief People Officer guests that we've had on the show recently. Now, they were all on the show to talk about their experience and their advice for becoming a Chief People Officer. But when it comes to their tips around business acumen, I think that they apply no matter what level of HR role you're in or aspiring to be in. So I really hope that you're going to find them helpful. And if we haven't met before, I'm going to really quickly say hello and welcome you to HR Coffee Time. I'm Faye Wallace. I'm a career and leadership coach for HR professionals. And as well as being the host of this HR Coffee Time podcast, I'm also the creator of the Essential HR Planner. The 2026 edition just went live, if you're listening to this, quite soon to it being released. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm also the creator of the Inspiring HR Leadership Program. But coming back to today's episode, let's crack on, and I'm going to start talking you through what business acumen actually is, what those words mean, and share the 3 brilliant, quick and easy tips to start building your own better business acumen. When it comes to the job that you're doing, business acumen is your understanding of how to make the organization that you work for successful. So you need to know how it works, who it serves, what it offers, the pressures it faces, what it needs to thrive, and what could put it at risk, and then finally, how it needs to adapt to stay successful in the future. And when you have that really strong understanding, that means you can start to develop HR initiatives that are going to help the organization to succeed and to really thrive, initiatives that are going to have a hugely positive impact. Hopefully, thinking about business acumen in this way takes some of the feelings of pressure off that you might have been feeling, because it's not about being more commercial. It's just about asking more, being curious, and getting closer to understanding how your organization really works and the challenges that it's up against. So let's carry on now and dive into looking at 3 straightforward ways you can start developing that business acumen. And all of these ways that I'm sharing with you today are things that you can start doing within the organization that you work for. So you haven't got to go and check yourself onto external courses. You haven't got to go and try and do anything outside of the organization. These are all things that you could start doing, hopefully, straight away. The first one is to spend time with the people in your organizations who are closest to the customer or the service user, depending on what kind of organization you work for. You'll be able to pick up on things that you can't necessarily learn from looking at pulse surveys or reading reports or looking at metrics. Instead, actually getting out and talking to people and seeing the challenges that the customers and the service users are experiencing, what the interactions are like. It's going to be so helpful for you. And to describe this better than I possibly can, we are now going to hear from Chief People Officer Kanika Mehra. She described this brilliantly when she came on the show for episode 147.
In the space of business and commercial acumen, I like working backwards from the customer. What that, in my mind, translates repeatedly on is, I need to know what is the customer, what is the end customer thinking about for our product, for our service, for our technology, Because ultimately, each and every employee's productivity is focused on that customer. So HR is not going to be removed from that as like we are the third step for the customer. We should be equally engaged with that customer and understanding, what do you want from us at Frontiers? What do you want from us at Amazon? What do you want from us? And that want, that desire, I think lots of research shows transfers itself into ENPS for our employees, because when they go out and recommend to the customer, I actually want you to come and join Frontiers. I want to recommend it.
I love this suggestion from Kanika, and it's a suggestion that other chief people officers made on the show as well. It's something that I was very aware of when I worked in my HR career, but I have to admit I wasn't always brilliant at doing it. I often would not make time for it because I'd think, oh gosh, I'm just too busy with everything else. So if you're anything like I was at that time, I would love to encourage you. Don't be like me. Be more like Kanika. See if you can start doing this in your role. Carve out some time to spend some time with the people who are closest to your customers or service users in your organization. And if you give it a try, I'd love to know how you get on. Please do let me know. It's always brilliant hearing from you. But now let's move on to our second tip for building your business acumen. And this one is all about getting involved in projects outside of HR. Again, this is something that came up several times in the Chief People Officer series, and we're going to hear all about it from Jane Beeston, who was a guest on the show for episode 148.
I think the more experiences that you have outside of HR to show your understanding of the business challenges, your understanding of how the business needs to react to those challenges, the better.
After Jane mentioned this, I asked her if she could share some examples of projects she'd been involved in that don't traditionally sit in the HR or people function. And here's what she had to say.
From a building project, which was really interesting, working with architects and design agencies. So that was a fun project. Setting up a gallery. So as you can see, we work with the most marvelous art material brands. And so I set up a gallery which was focused on providing a platform for young artists. So really got into the art world with that project, which was great. I've worked within factories in terms of the setup of the factory, the organization. I've worked with the customer services team to sort of reduce the amount of fines that they were incurring. So we were changing their work practices. I'm always being accused of sort of poking my nose into different projects. People laugh. They know that I do it. They know that you can't stop me getting involved. But it's because I'm curious, I'm interested, and I know I have a view and an experience or a different angle that can add value. And, how many times have businesses introduced new systems, introduced new ways of working, introduced new kit or whatever it may be, and forgotten the importance of the person using it or their attitude in terms of receiving something new. It's always something we just do. We forget the people. And so having that different lens, but coming at it from a business perspective, not just, I'm here to talk about people, actually from a real business perspective where the people lens adds value. And so therefore I unashamedly stick my nose in.
I hope you enjoyed hearing those examples from Jane as much as I did. I remember when she first shared them with me being quite surprised. I hadn't really fully appreciated until I did these interviews with chief people officers, just how many of them were doing this, really broadening their depth of understanding of the business by getting involved in these other projects. So again, I'd love to encourage you to give this a try and really help boost your business acumen in this way. Are there any cross-functional projects going on at the moment that you could get involved in? Could you start to have chats with people from other departments and find out what it is they're working on and see, can you be nosy? I love, again, the way that Jane described that she loved poking her nose into things. How can you start poking your nose into things and find those opportunities for yourself so you start developing amazing business acumen? But now let's move on to our third piece of advice. And to share this piece of advice with you, we are going to hear from Dotty Day, who was a guest in episode 151. She's an interim chief people officer. And This is probably the one you might be least surprised about, because I think when we hear the words business acumen, we often think, well, I often think of finance. And there's no getting away from it, really. To properly have a really good understanding of how the business works, what's important to it, what's impacting it, we've got to get confident with the numbers. Something I know, again, I certainly didn't used to be hugely confident with. So it was great to hear Dotty's advice. Let's go ahead and hear what she had to say about this.
We all talk about HR wanting to be more commercial. Well, what does that actually mean? That means getting curious about the business. That means asking those silly questions that you might feel awkward to ask. It's about understanding how a business or an organization makes their money and loses their money. And therefore, everything that's in there is about how it operates as a business. The crux of most businesses to this day still is operating costs are predominantly people-based. Yes, there's systems, yes, there's processes, yes, there's suppliers, etc. But predominantly an operating cost tends to be the headcount. And so actually, as a people professional wanting to move into that space, asking those curious questions is a must. It really is, because it helps you to identify the business problems that you can then start to think about, okay, well, what kind of strategy could we build on this problem with? And how can we truly solve today's problem, but also anticipate tomorrow's problems as well? And it's the curiosity, I think, that is absolutely the bedrock to being able to develop that commercial acumen. I spent years working with finance people who, frankly, initially hated my guts because I'm an overhead from the center, essentially. That's kind of my introduction. But actually spending time with your finance contacts, asking those questions about, okay, so how do we manage our accounts? How do we cost things out? You know, what are our key performance indicators as a business? And therefore, how could I then influence those? And what metrics might I need to be able to measure in order to influence those metrics?
What I thought was really reassuring about Dotty's advice is that she's not saying you have to be an absolute whiz when it comes to the numbers. She's not saying you've got to go away and study up and SWOT up and all of these things. She's saying you can approach it by being curious. Just ask those questions. And again, that's a theme that came up quite a lot throughout the Chief People Officer series. I think there's a really strong message here about us not feeling we have to know all the answers to everything, that we have to feel like we're an expert on every aspect of the business. In fact, people often really appreciate it when you come to them with that curiosity, those questions, because they can see that you really want to learn and you really value their input. I'm hoping in the future to get someone with a finance background on the show. I've already chatted with a couple of people about this to see if they can give us even more advice about the questions that we can be asking. But I don't want that to make you think, oh, okay then, Faye, I'll just hold off on developing this part of my business acumen until I've heard that episode. Please, please, please don't wait for that one. It might not be ready for ages. Instead, let me share a few questions that you could start asking the finance team or someone within your finance team straight away to start building up your financial understanding of the organization that you're working in. Here are some example questions that you might want to give a try, or hopefully they'll spark some inspiration for questions of your own. They are, what are the key financial priorities for the organization this year? What tends to drive our costs up or down? What's putting financial pressure on us at the moment? And then finally, which financial metrics influence decision making? I really hope that if you try any of those out, or all of them, or some of your own questions that might be inspired from hearing from Dotty, that it's going to give your confidence a bit of a boost, because you'll realize you're really starting to get to grips with the organization on a deeper level than before. So that brings us to the end of this episode. We took a look at what business acumen actually means, and hopefully now it's feeling a bit less daunting. And then, of course, we dove into 3 different ways that you can start to build better business acumen for yourself. As a reminder, the first way was to spend time with the people in your organization who are closest to the customer. The second way was to get involved in projects outside of HR. And the third and final way was the one that we just heard, which was all about getting a better understanding of the organization's finances by spending some time speaking to one of your colleagues or lots of your colleagues in the finance team. I really hope that it's been helpful hearing this advice. I would love to know if it has been useful, and if you're going to give any of it a try, you can let me know in the comments below if you're watching the video version of this podcast, or you can always get in touch with me on LinkedIn. You can find me on there as Faye Wallace. So that is Faye without an E on the end, and Wallace is with an IS on the end instead of an ACE. And before I say goodbye, could I ask you for a tiny favour? Now that the podcast has been on YouTube for a little while, I have started obsessively looking and checking to see if anyone's watching it. And it absolutely makes my day if someone likes one of the videos. So if you are watching the video version, please do give it a like for me. It means a huge amount. It means that I know you're watching it and enjoying it. And if you're listening to the audio version, I'm terrible at asking for this, but again, it makes an enormous difference if you're able to rate and review the show. So if you're listening in Apple Podcasts, you can give it a rating, hopefully a 5-star rating, and write it a review in there. If you're listening on Spotify, you can't write a review, but you can leave a rating. And you may be listening in a completely different podcasting platform. If it lets you leave a rating or a review, that would be amazing. And if you do take the time to do any of those things, please feel free to let me know so I can say thank you. I hugely appreciate your support. Not only are the ratings, reviews, and the likes a really nice thing for me to see, but more importantly, they're a great indication to all the podcasting platforms to recommend this show to other people so that we can help as many HR and people professionals with this free show as possible. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to being back again in 2 weeks' time with the next episode for you.